Beauty is very important in prison. Inmates would go to many lengths to keep their beauty routines, and oftentimes this would have them using some crazy products. One good example of this is your hair. Inmates loved to keep their hair looking nice, but sometimes they were forced to make their own hair products. BlackHairInformation.com talks about prisoners using jam and cocoa powder and mixing that together in order to make their own hair gel. And if they wanted to dye their hair, they would use Kool-Aid to dye it. And if they wanted to style it, they would use pencils, and they would roll that up in their hair in order to make rollers and curl their hair. Some prisons had salons, and inmates would often cut other inmates' hair, and these inmates would learn and train and practice their craft in hope to take the cosmetology exam. If they passed the cosmetology exam, they would leave prison with their cosmetology license. Makeup is another great example of lengths that prisoners would go through. Inmates would have to get very creative with their makeup, and they would have to make it. Teen Vogue gives us a great example of making makeup in prison. Teen Vogue talks about how one prisoner used things from the arts and crafts counter in her daily makeup routine. She used the paint from a paint palette, and she would put that on her eyes to make eyeshadow, and she would use watercolor pencils as her eyeliner. It was also very common to use food in your daily makeup routine. Prisoners would take M&Ms and rub them on their lips to make lip stains. Birthday cards with glitter were such a treat. Prisoners would take the glitter from the birthday card and put it on their eyes, for their eyelids, to make glittery eyeshadow. And they would take the ink from colored newspapers and magazines and put that on their cheeks to make blush. If you wanted to have a slight tan, you could take the coffee from the coffee that you drank that morning, and Beauty Insider tells us that inmates would rub it on their skin in order to make a self-tan. You could buy some of these items, but it wasn't really what you needed, so sometimes you just had to make do. Ranker tells us how important it was for women to have makeup. Their studies showed that the women who used makeup had a greater boost and feeling of self-worth. Though makeup is allowed in prison, it does come with its rules. Inmates are not allowed to alter their appearance. They have to be easily distinguished by the guards. Inmates are also not allowed to receive any lipstick tubes or any cards that have makeup smudged on them, because this could contain traces of drugs. Another great example of beauty in prison is women's skincare routines. Skincare routines were very limited in prison because they didn't have much, so they really had to make do. Teen Vogue talked about a prisoner who used some vinegar on her face to cleanse it, and then she would use oatmeal in the shower as a mask. Other prisoners would use the after shower lotion as a moisturizer. They would use cocoa butter, they would use Vaseline, and they would implement these in their daily skincare routines. Beauty Advisors tells us how prisoners would use coffee, and they would scrub it on their arms and face in order to make a scrub, so that way their skin was nice and soft and they got all that dry skin off. Inmates really used anything that they could get their hands on to make a scrub, or if it had moisturizing properties, they would use it. But all in all, these are just a few of the many lengths that inmates would go through to have good beauty routines. Inmates are very, very smart, and they ended up just having to work with what they had in order to make sure that they felt beautiful.